Hey guys, I'm your host Tara A. Devlin, and welcome to this week's episode of Kawabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. The latest book in the Reikan series, Volume 3, is now out. If you'd like to learn more about some of Japan's most haunted and dangerous spots, then this is the book for you. You can find all sorts of abandoned shrines, hospitals, parks, and even lesser-known places you wouldn't even think could be haunted. That's Reikan, the Most Haunted Locations in Japan, Volume 3, out now. This week, we're looking at a selection of tales from the Chugoku region of Japan, the westernmost part of the main island of Honshu, and also the area where I lived for a decade. As such, these stories are somewhat familiar and special to me. We'll eventually be taking a tour all over Japan's different regions in different episodes, but to kick today's off, we're heading to a place very familiar to me, Tottori Prefecture. A small village close to Mount Daisen has a very strange custom that continues to this day. But is there any truth to the superstitions behind it? Find out in The Strange Custom. This story comes from the area where my mother's family lives. Our family home is in a really remote location, with the Sea of Japan in front and Mount Daisen right behind it. And there, they've long had a strange custom. Once a year, I won't say when to avoid identification, everyone in the village gathers at the community center before sundown, and they stay there all night until dawn. But it's a bit weird. On the day of the ceremony, they thoroughly cover all the windows and vents, so there's not a single peephole left. Then, before the sun sets, the villagers have a choice of either spending the night outside the village, or spending it inside the community center. For those who stay in the community center, they all eat together, play cards, and generally have a fun time. But it's absolutely forbidden to cry. That's why babies aren't allowed to take part. When I was in elementary school, my father warned me that on this day alone, I absolutely mustn't cry. He also screamed like a madman if I tried to touch the windows. Then, the next morning, we couldn't see outside, so we waited until 8 a.m. The village chief goes outside by himself and returns an hour later. Only then is everyone else allowed to leave. But when the village chief leaves, he's so nervous that even a child can tell how he's feeling. And by the time he returns, he's so pale-faced and exhausted that he nearly passes out. I haven't been back to my family home for over a decade now, so I haven't experienced it during that time, but it's still going even today. But even now, I have no idea what happens outside that community center. The only people who will ever know are those who experience it as the village chief. Knowing how panicked the village chief is on the day, neither my father nor my brother or I even want to know. Now, I don't want to stir up anyone's fears, but I'll add a little more to this story. I was involved in these ceremonies until I graduated from high school. So, as I grew up, I thought more and more about this ceremony. But I don't think there's something outside the community center. I think it's a curse or a haunting or something like that. And the village chief, who knows the details, and the villagers, who don't know anything, carry on with the ceremony, even though they know it's unscientific, because of the weight of the history behind it. The village chief who nearly passed out upon returning was a high school student, so it's not that anything happened, but rather the extreme tension of what might happen that caused him to pass out. There were some village chiefs who carried out the ceremony in a perfectly calm and even businesslike manner. But even knowing it's unscientific, if someone said to me that I could go into the village on the night of the ceremony, I don't think I actually could. Because that fear of whatever might be out there on the night of the ceremony has been deeply embedded in my psyche since I was just a small child. I think that we as people are able to control our own actions because of that fear we hold of things that might surpass us. And it is for that reason, perhaps, that the ceremony was invented. Next, we're heading to my home prefecture of Shimane. Some kids head to their grandparents' house and inside find a locked safe. Naturally, they do everything they can to open it, but let's just say they probably don't want to find out what's inside. Find out why in Safe. This happened when I was in the 3rd grade. I was born and raised in Tokyo, meaning I was a city kid through and through. But both my parents came from Shimane, so during the summer holidays, we often went back there to visit my mother's parents. Our grandparents didn't see us often, so when they did, they always fawned over us. Their house was rather large, but otherwise nothing special. Although, there was one strange thing about it. At least, at the time it was strange to me. In the living room, they had a safe. It was about the size of a microwave and an ordinary dial type. But, of all places, it was located underneath the altar. It was almost like the safe itself was enshrined. Now, children like to play with things, and I was no different. I was super excited to try to open this safe. My grandfather watched me with narrowed eyes, but he didn't try to stop me. When my grandmother came into the living room, she screamed at my grandfather, but he was just like, "What? It's not like he's going to actually get it open." And so he let us be. "Open it! Is there 100 million yen inside?" I said to my grandfather. "It's broken," he replied. "Not even I can open it." And so, gradually I got bored of it and found other things to do. "Tomorrow, I'll take you squid fishing," my grandfather also said. That night, the table was set with a variety of fresh fish dishes, and they were all much better than the fish that's sold in Tokyo. The grown-ups started drinking, and then my younger brother and I started exploring the house. Again, we started messing around with the safe. As my brother watched me, it didn't take long until we heard a click. Did it open? I thought. And then I opened the door. At that moment, all the hairs on my body stood on end. Inside the safe, which was around the size of a microwave, was a slightly larger than normal woman's face. And it was wavering, like a flame. Beneath her neck, there appeared to be a huge pile of protective charms. I let rip a scream, and my brother and I both started crying. Hearing my scream, our parents and grandparents all came running. Seeing us crying in front of the safe, my grandfather said, "No way! Did you actually get it open?" He should have been able to see that for himself. But looking at it, the safe was closed again. I had no memory of closing it myself. My grandmother rattled it a few times, but it didn't open again. My grandfather didn't yell, but as I was sobbing, he did admonish us. "Did you see something inside? He asked gently, but even a casual observer could see the panic on his face. A woman," I repeated. "What did she look like?" he asked. "I don't know. But she was angry. She was angry." Yeah, the woman's face that I saw was very clearly angry. At least, that was how she looked to me. My grandfather let out a huge sigh and then gave my grandmother some instructions. She rushed out the front door. I was then taken to the dining room table and given a glass of what I think was sake. That was what I remember the most. I thought I was going to die. My brother almost immediately threw up, but my grandfather encouraged him. "Come on now, you're a good boy." When my grandmother came back, she took us to the bathroom and, for some reason, shaved our heads. By that point, my brother was pretty out of it. And I guess, thanks to the sake, we soon after fell asleep. "We can't go squid fishing today," my grandfather said the next day. "The waves are too rough and dangerous." It was clear outside, and there was no wind. I wanted to ask him about the night before, but I felt like I'd done something terrible, so in the end, I couldn't ask anyone. When I grew up and became a university student, I remembered what happened for the first time in years and decided to ask my brother about it. But he didn't remember it. That's not too strange. After all, he was only in the first grade at the time. Next, I asked my parents. But they said nothing like that ever happened either. I told them they shaved my head and made me drink sake, but they said I shaved my head to join the baseball team. And the sake I tried out of curiosity, and then I passed out. Now, it's true that I started playing baseball in the third grade, but I don't remember shaving my head for it. Looking back on it now, I wonder if those memories were actually just a dream. But even now, when I close my eyes, I can still see that terrifying woman's face. What on earth happened to me that summer? Next, some construction workers make an incredibly strange discovery in the mountains. Something that, by all logic, shouldn't be. Find out what in Gravestones. This happened a long time ago. I was excavating a mountain in the Chugoku region with a digger so we could build a tunnel when suddenly the machine stopped. I moved to the front of the machine to see what was going on, and one of the workers pointed to his feet. I don't know why the machine has stopped, but look at this. There in the ground were numerous gravestones spread out all over the place. It wasn't terribly unusual to find gravestones, or even bones, but it was strange that they were here, in this location. We were halfway up a 200-meter high mountain, meaning, unless the mountain was dropped right on top of a cemetery, there was just no way that the gravestones could be there. It wasn't a man-made mountain, and there were no signs that the mountain had previously been dug up either. We were extremely confused, but at the same time, we couldn't afford to delay the construction work, so we continued as planned, and the job was completed. For this next tale, we're heading to Hiroshima. A group of friends visit a famous ghost spot, but there come across something they just can't explain. Something that will haunt them for the rest of their lives. Find out what in Shoujo-en. Although it no longer exists, I'd like to tell you about an experience I had as a teenager at a famous ghost spot in Hiroshima called Shoujo-en. Shoujoeng is the name of an abandoned women's prison that's no longer in use, and over a decade ago, it was pretty famous in Hiroshima as a haunted location. At the time, we were just kids who had gotten our licenses, so we loved to visit local ghost spots night after night. We visited places like Koi Ridge, Uokiri Dam, and Nabara Gorge. But Shoujoeng was by far the most atmospheric, because we had to get out of the car and walk around the huge lot full of empty buildings. On this particular day, we were out and about as a rather large group. 3 guys and 3 girls. We all got in the minivan one of the guys' fathers owned, and on the way, we scared the girls with made-up stories about how it was haunted by the spirit of a woman who had been bullied to death. When we arrived at the lot after travelling up a rather narrow road, we found a car already stopped in front of the entrance. A single sedan. There was nowhere else to park at Shoujoeng, so that meant there were already guests inside. Thinking the mood ruined, we stopped the minivan on a spot nearby so the other car could still leave, and then we went inside. Normally, we'd take the main path that intersected with the corridor and then turn back at the end. But we didn't want to run into whoever was already there. So instead, we decided to take a side path to go around the back of the buildings. When I say side path, there weren't actually any paths around the rear of the buildings, however, so this meant we had to enter the mountains somewhat to get around. But I thought that entering the buildings through the windows would be fresh and exciting, although the girls didn't seem to agree. And so it was agreed we should just take the main path after all. But instead of going into the building through the front door, we'd climb in through the windows instead. Once inside, we immediately ran into a group of people. It was so sudden that my heart almost burst from my chest. The 6 of us screamed, and then we all laughed in relief. There were 4 or 5 of them in the group, and I think 2 were girls. Oh man, you scared me. Don't scare me like that. Everyone laughed about it, but then we slowly started to back away. The other group had no reaction to us at all. They didn't say a single thing and just walked right past us and kept going. We went outside, froze, and then whispered to each other. "What the hell was that?" "I'm scared," we said as we watched them exit the building in the distance. They then moved towards the other end of the lot. Silence fell over us for a moment, and then we discussed what to do next. We were creeped out, so should we just go home maybe? The girls were terrified and didn't want to go any further, but we did come all this way to be scared. So in the end, we decided to have a quick look around and then go home. On the way back, we muttered about how we didn't see that group again. But when we reached the entrance, they were all standing around the parked car. They already left? Aren't they going home? I mean, what are they doing there anyway? The 4 of them were each standing in front of a car door, but they didn't look like they were about to open them. They just stood there in silence and looked at us. We had to walk past them to reach our car, and the whole time they just kept watching us. I was annoyed, but they didn't seem to be angry at us or anything, although it did feel really odd and uncomfortable. Then one of my friends seemed to be unable to bear it any longer and he yelled at them. "What the hell are you guys looking at?" It was all so sudden that we all froze on the spot, But the other group didn't even flinch. They just kept staring at us. We were honestly so creeped out that we urged our friend to get in the car and get going. And even as we drove away, that group continued staring at us. What the hell was that? Oh my god, that was so creepy! We complained in the car as we drove down the West Bypass. But one of those girls was kinda cute, don't you think? One of my friends said. You were able to spot a cute girl even during all of that? Which one? The girl with short hair. There was a girl with short hair? There was. Man, you're a creep. There were girls there? The driver said. Ah, come on, man. Everyone started laughing. I didn't see very well, and anyway, there are girls here, so enough of that. The topic of conversation soon changed. But how are those guys gonna get home? What do you mean, how? They have a car. Can they all fit inside? Maybe some of them will get in the boot. Huh? What? What are you talking about? Well, they're not all gonna fit inside. The car could fit 5, right? Huh? There weren't that many people, right? I thought that maybe I missed something, so I asked. Wait, weren't there only 4 people there? No, I saw 7 or 8. Seriously? Where? Around the car? Yeah, they were all there around the car. But that wasn't what I saw. I only saw 4 people around the car. Where are you talking about? Yeah, I'm also talking about around the car. I turned to the girls. Did you see it? Yeah, I also saw 7 or 8 people, I think. Huh? I saw 4, I think. I also only saw 4. 1 person at each door. Right? That's what I saw too. Everyone in the car fell silent. No, maybe there weren't 8 people, but there definitely wasn't 4 either. Where were they? Around the car. I'm telling you, there were only 4. As we broke out into an argument, the driver then spoke in a dark tone. I only saw 2. In the end, we never got an answer as to why we all saw something different, and a chill ran down my spine. We dropped the girls off after that, leaving just us 3 guys, and we wanted an answer, so we decided to go back to the lot again. It was quite some distance away, but we drove back there again in the middle of the night. Quite a bit of time had passed, so we honestly didn't expect anyone to still be there. But as we turned the corner and drove down the road towards the entrance, suddenly the driver slammed on the brakes. They're still there. No way. Seriously? I looked, and there were 4 people standing around the car. There are 4 of them, right? Nobody replied. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Where are you looking? Everyone fell silent. But more importantly, what on earth were those guys doing? I wasn't the only one who suddenly felt scared, and the driver started to back up the car. Everyone remained silent. And after that, nobody mentioned how many people they saw. A year passed, and then it was decided that I'd go back to Shoujoen with a friend. I really didn't want to, but if I said I was scared, they'd think me a chicken, so I had to go. The moment I saw the entrance, I got chills like I'd never experienced before. That same car was there. At first, I thought maybe it was just a similar car, but looking closer, it really was the same one. It was dusty and surrounded by grass, so it looked like it had been there for a while. My heart pounded wildly, and I almost wanted to throw up. I honestly thought my heart would stop if I ran into those guys again, so I told my friend how I honestly felt, and thankfully, I didn't have to go inside. A short while after that, Shoujoen was destroyed because people were constantly complaining about the young people going in at night and making lots of noise. Hearing that, I was relieved. Deep in the corner of my mind, it was always there. That car in front of Shoujoen, and what might happen if I ran into those guys again. I think that car was a slightly older white Corolla from around 1997 or so. I can't help but wonder how long that car was there for, but I honestly think it's better that I don't know. Let's head down to Yamaguchi for this next one and check out an interesting local superstition. Find out what in Crossing the Sea. I heard this story from my father, who passed away several years ago. When he was a child, there was this fisherman who lived nearby. He was a bit weird, but he was always really nice to my father. Where they lived, somewhere in Yamaguchi Prefecture, there was a tradition that on rainy days, you should never set out on your boat. Although why and to what degree of rain remained unclear. One day, it was raining heavily, but the eccentric fisherman said he was going to head out on his boat. Everyone objected, but he ignored them and went out anyway. Before long he returned, however, and now he was acting even more strangely than usual. When everyone asked him what happened, he said nothing, but later he told my father, and my father alone, what he saw. Apparently, shortly after the old guy set out on his boat, the area quickly got so foggy that he couldn't even see the coast anymore. As he went further out to sea, he then suddenly saw a huge boat with its sails up. He couldn't see anyone on the boat, but he saw something written on the sails. Namu Amida Butsu. Naturally, even he was scared, and he realized it would be dangerous to go any further, so he turned back. Apparently, he said he was glad he was able to return safely, but according to my father, the next day he went out fishing again and got caught in the propeller of his boat and died. Two friends traveling through the Chugoku region find themselves at one of the most important sites in all of Japanese mythology. But could there actually be some truth to it? Find out in Trip to the Land of the Dead. This is a scary story I heard the other day while I was drinking with my friend, Y-kun. His family home is on a farm, and they work in the fields until autumn. But once winter comes around, he no longer has any work. So he does his best working part-time as a courier and other such jobs. We get together a few times a year to drink and catch up, and he mentioned that last autumn, one of his baseball-loving friends invited him to go to a Hiroshima Carps game together. Harvesting season was over, so he got permission from his parents and went with his friend M-kun on a trip to the Chugoku region to watch the game and look around. They went to the Mazda Stadium in Hiroshima, watched the game, and then apparently drove to the neighbouring prefectures. They visited the Tottori sand dunes, and then after that drove to Shimane. They visited various places, and then drove down National Highway 9 towards Yonago City. On the way, they found a sign that said, "Entrance to the Realm of the Dead." Hey, that sounds interesting. Want to check it out? Could make for a good story, M-kun said. Y-kun honestly didn't want to go, but he didn't want to make M-kun, the driver, feel bad, so he agreed. They drove for a while until they reached a place called Yomotsu Hirasaka. It was 3 p.m, and the weather was fine. But the moment they arrived, Y-kun noticed something strange. Even though it was autumn, it was still quite warm. But the moment they got there, suddenly a chill ran down his spine. "Let's get out here," M-kun said, so Y-kun followed him. But he struggled to breathe, and his shoulders and back felt oddly heavy. There, he saw large stone pillars and a shrine gate. There was no one else around, and Y-kun found it creepy. M-kun, meanwhile, was carefree. Huh, what an interesting spot. It's nice that there's no one else here, he said, not making much sense. He then held his phone out to Y-kun. "Take a picture for me." Y-kun wanted to get away from there as soon as possible, so he put the stone pillars in the background and then looked at the phone. There, in the forest behind the stones, he could see something white. At first, it looked somewhat like smoke, but then he realized that it had the features of a human face. Looking at it made him feel sick in his chest. "What's wrong?" "Quickly take the picture," M-kun said. So he did. When he was done, he quickly returned to the car. M-kun also finally returned, and then they set off towards Hyogo, where they planned to stay next. But then, about 30 minutes later, M-kun stopped the car at a convenience store. "Oh, my stomach hurts. Can you take over driving for me?" Sweat poured from his forehead, and he looked to be in great pain. His face was pale, and he seemed to be in great distress. Y-kun got behind the steering wheel, looked up a nearby hospital on the car navigation system, and then made his way straight for it. The hospital was open, so they took M-kun in right away. They couldn't find anything in particular wrong with him, so they said it was probably just an upset stomach, and gave him some medicine. After taking that, he started feeling better a short time later. Y-kun then drove to the hot spring they were planning to stay at in Hyogo Prefecture, although they arrived a little later than expected. They washed up, ate, briefly chatted about nothing in particular, and then they went to bed. But before that, M-kun, who had been staring at his phone the whole time, went over to Y-kun, his face pale. "Hey, this is the photo you took earlier, right?" he said, showing him his phone. Y-kun confirmed it was. That was the photo he took. But it was a strange photo. In the forest behind the stones, the smoke that Y-kun thought looked like a face was clearly visible. It looked like a person laughing. But behind one of the stones, there also appeared to be a hand sticking out. A pale hand. When he took the photo, there was nobody there other than the two of them. Y-kun crawled under the blankets to go to sleep. After that, they went to Osaka and then safely returned home. "I never want to go there ever again," Waikun said. "My body felt so heavy. It was honestly really creepy. And it was so weird that it scared me too," he said, his face red from drinking. Back in Shimane, some baseball club members find themselves stranded at a school after some flooding, but it seems they might not be alone in their lodgings. Find out why in Shriek. This happened when I was in high school in Shimane. On this particular day, I went to a high school in the east of the prefecture for a match that lasted about 3 hours. When we were getting ready to go home after the match, suddenly it started pouring rain really heavily. It was so bad that there was a landslide on the road home and we couldn't go past it. And so, that day we ended up having to stay at the school. We stayed in a dorm connected to the school that the table tennis club used to use as a training camp. There were us 12 members and one coach, making for 13 people all up staying there. But something was clearly strange. The room was a massive tatami mat room. The hall was about 150 meters long and dimly lit. And the large bathroom had 3 mirrors that were all facing each other. We were scared, so we all decided to sleep in the large tatami mat room together. We stayed up late laughing and chatting, but then the coach opened the sliding doors to the room next to us and told us that we were being too noisy and to go to sleep. We ignored him and kept chatting, but then 3 of the club members suddenly gasped and covered their ears. "What's wrong?" we asked. "Didn't you hear that voice just now?" they said. But nobody else knew what they were talking about. Only the 3 of them seemed to hear it. Thinking they were lying, I asked them what the voice said. "Shut up," they said. But apparently it sounded like a woman's voice right by their ears. At the time, the coach was asleep in the next room. We didn't believe them, but then one of the guys pulled out his phone and said he was actually recording. We were talking about girls and such, so he secretly recorded the conversation as a prank. Nervously, we all listened. Around the point where they heard the strange voice, there was a sound like nails scratching a board. And it was then followed by a woman's high-pitched, shrieking laughter. Creeped out, we decided to go to bed, but then someone else noticed something strange and screamed, "Hey, why can't you hear our voices in the recording?" He was right. The only thing you could hear before that woman's strange shriek was nothing but white noise. Heading over to Okayama, this next story looks at an old hospital with an equally long history that might be harboring more than a few secrets. Find out why in Conversation with a Ghost. This happened when I lived in Okayama. At the time, I was working at a hospital, I'll call it H Hospital, that kept patients in subacute care. We worked in a shift system that included nights. The hospital itself was built in the 1930s or so, and the inside still looked old too. There were regular hospital rooms, as well as private rooms, but the 5th floor alone wasn't in use. The 2nd, 3rd and 4th floors were used for the patients' rooms. But on the 5th floor you could find the bathroom, so sometimes we'd take them up there, meaning it wasn't completely closed off. But whenever I had to go to the 5th floor to help someone bathe, it always felt eerie, creepy, and empty. even after 3 years of working there. It wasn't just that floor that was strange, however, and the entire building had a structure that you wouldn't find in modern hospitals now. So I always thought to myself that if I were to be admitted to a hospital, I wouldn't want it to be this one. On the 4th floor, there was a room with 4 patient beds lined up in a row. Of course, each bed was separated from the others. From the entrance, you could see the 1st bed, and to the right of that, the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th beds followed in a straight line. Around the middle of December, the patient in the 4th bed died of heart failure. With things being so busy around the New Year's period, that 4th bed remained empty for a while. One night, probably around 2 a.m., I got a call from the patient in the 3rd bed of that room. I'll call her A-san. She said in a small voice, "Please come here." "I'm on my way, please wait," I said, and then I made my way straight over. The room was pitch black, with the only light coming from the headlights on the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd beds. The 4th bed was empty, so I squatted down on that side to face A-san. "The person in the next bed keeps complaining that their hands hurt," she said. "And they keep rubbing them. Can you please take a look?" A-san was elderly, but she was still clear-headed and had her wits about her. I didn't think that she was lying or hallucinating, so I honestly grew a little afraid and couldn't turn around. "There's nobody in the next bed," I finally said to her. "Really?" she said, looking at me with a confused expression on her face. Even now, I still remember the strange cold feeling on my back at that time. For a while, I couldn't even move. But maybe it just felt longer than it actually was. "It appears that everything is fine now," I said to A-san. "If you hear anything again, please let me know." I then almost fled from the room. As I was doing my rounds around the time the sun was starting to rise, I did my best not to look at that 4th bed. And when I told the incoming nurse about it during the shift change, she said that this sometimes happened when that 4th bed was empty. Sometimes the nurses got calls from that empty bed, or sometimes people saw a figure there. I had numerous scary experiences in H Hospital after that. Being so old with such a long history, countless people must have died there over the years. Just like that patient who spoke with A-san, who didn't seem to realize that they had already passed away. A young boy visiting family in Hiroshima falls ill and has a strange fever dream. But was it just a dream? Find out in the Well. When I was still in elementary school, I went to visit my grandparents' house in Hiroshima for the New Year. But while there, I broke out in a fever and was sick in bed. I nodded off on a bed in the Japanese-style room, and next thing I knew, it was evening. I could see the faint red light from the winter sunset through the sliding door to the next room. Then, the sliding door started to open, and a girl's face appeared in the 20-centimeter gap. Her head was shaved, and she looked down at me. In the darkness, she kind of looked like a white no mask floating in the air. "Mahiru's calling for you," the girl said. Mahiru was my cousin, 2 years younger than me, but he lived in Tokyo. "Oh, Mahiru's here too," I thought in my feverish daze. "Where?" I asked the girl. "In the well." "The well?" My grandfather's house did have a well, but why would he be there? "What's he doing there?" I asked. "I don't know, but it's too late now." The child's expression didn't change the entire time she spoke. I guess I fell asleep after that though, because I don't remember anything else. About a month later, I heard from my mother that Mahiru had passed away. He apparently fell into a canal during the winter holidays and drowned. Finally this week, we're taking another quick trip to Okayama, and this time a tunnel with an interesting history. Find out why in The Woman Waving in the Tunnel. This happened to me about 10 years ago. I have a bit of a sixth sense, and when I was a child, sometimes I could see ghosts. And even if I couldn't see them sometimes I could still sense an otherwise creepy atmosphere. One day, I was in the car with my family. We were heading towards Tamano City from Okayama City, and on the way, we had to cross Kojima Bay Bridge. There was a tunnel shortly after crossing the bridge, and as soon as we entered it, something felt very, very creepy. It was a short tunnel, but I guess it felt kind of dark because it was out in the countryside. I couldn't see anything, and although it wasn't really any darker than other tunnels, for some reason, I was terrified. We took that same road on the way home, but again, as soon as we entered that tunnel, a strange feeling washed over me. "Please pass through the tunnel quickly," I said, scared. My eyes were shut tight, but suddenly I grew curious about something, so I opened them. There, at the edge of the road, I saw a woman looking at me. I was so scared that I couldn't even scream. Pedestrians also used the tunnel, so I told myself that it was just a coincidence. She had to be a pedestrian too. Because if she wasn't, then it would be terrifying. A few days later, I was talking to a neighbor and I mentioned what happened at that tunnel. She said that her husband also used that tunnel, and he also apparently saw a woman at the exact same spot I did. As she continued, all the details lined up. It seemed to be the same woman I saw. And according to him, the woman waved her hands at him. When I heard that, I asked, "Was she someone he knew?" "Not at all," she said. Apparently, she was motioning to him to come closer. He mentioned this to a co-worker sitting in the passenger's seat, but when his co-worker looked over, he said that he couldn't see any woman there. Apparently, there used to be a lot of accidents in that tunnel, so I think there are no doubt lots of people who have had the same experience as me. A massive thank you and shout out to this week's Kami tier members, Just Sawn and Emerald. It's thanks to your support, along with everyone else, that I'm able to keep doing this show, so thank you very much. Don't forget to check out Deikan, the Most Haunted Locations in Japan Volume 3, out on Amazon right now. And check out our merchandise store at kowabana.store. And if you'd like to chat about this week's stories, come and join us in the Kowabana Discord. You can find that link in the description or on kowabana.net. You can also check out our Patreon at patreon.com/Tara A. Devlin for exclusive bonus stories and extras, or our YouTube channel at youtube.com/KowabanaJapan for all sorts of Japanese horror you won't find anywhere else. Thanks guys, stay safe, and I'll see you again next time for even more Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Want even more scary stories? Head over to kowabana.net for new translations every week. You can also join our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Head over to kowabana.net now.